Hello and welcome to your go-to Detroit Pistons podcast, the Pistons Pulse, co-hosted by me, Bryce Simon of Motor City Hoops, a former D1 hooper and current teacher, husband, and father of three amazing kids.
And I'm Omari Sankofa, the second Pistons beat writer for the Detroit Free Press.
And of course, we're always blessed to be joined by our producer, Wes Davenport. If you are not listening to Wes and Blake Silverman over on the Pin Down on the Detroit Bad Boys YouTube channel, you absolutely should be. If you are not reading all of Omari Sankofa II's O2, as we like to call him around here, all of his articles on the Detroit Free Press, you should be. And I will also shout out the Motor City Hoops Substack, where me and Harry from Order of the Blazing Horse provide really good content for free over there. That is a free subscription on the Motor City Hoops Substack. Real quick shout out to one of my sister-in-laws, Rebby. That's her birthday today. So shout out to her. Happy birthday. Omari, before we talk Pistons and get into this mailbag, we had a snow day today. We just found out that we have a snow day tomorrow. Technically, I think it's cold temperature days, not snow days. I may have to just cave and do full dynasty mode on my kid's PS5. I might have to just sell out, take it over from him, and just go old school 20 years ago on a PS5 day.
Have you played? How much time have you spent with the new college football so far? Has it just been your kid, or have you been dabbling, or have you been into it pretty
literally today he's down there playing. I actually was trying to do laundry for the whole house. We've been sick, so I'm trying to wash all of the bedding, all of that stuff. Anyway, I walked by him to do that, and I'm like, all right, I'm gonna go take the sticks for a little bit. And I played one offensive possession, got a pick six, scored a touchdown. Then I gave him the controller back. So that's essentially what happens every couple days is I do that. I just take it over for a couple possessions. Shout out Harry. Harry does great work. Thank you for being here. So that's kind of the situation with the PS5 and me right now.
I think you should dive in. So, probably a good percentage of American men. I grew up playing sports games, obviously, most of us. I never really played college football though growing up. So
no, you didn't?
No, so I was mostly 2K. Or really it was NBA Live.
Yeah.
Then it was 2K. And then it was a little bit of Madden. But I didn't really get into football games as much until I got to college. And by then they'd already stopped doing NCAA. So I got into the new one that came out, and definitely the most fun I've had with a sports game in a while, because I kind of burnt out on 2K, but I feel like this one plays really well. And I don't know how much spare time you have, but if you start it and you get into it like I did, it's going to eat up your spare time. So I guess how much about this life do you want to be? Because you are a man with kids. There's a fire truck passing by. Sorry. You're a busy man with kids, and you don't have snow days too often. So you're going to take advantage of this day tomorrow, and you're going to be a changed man. So how much do you want to commit to this?
This is what I'm scared of, is that I turn on college football. I go straight dynasty mode where I want to recruit and get into it. And then either something comes up, I get busy with something else, or I get 80% into it. And I'm like, okay, I got to finish at least another season or, whatever. And then I get back to real life on Thursday, Friday, Saturday, et cetera.
Yeah.
The Pistons start playing games. This is what's unique right now is there's not even NBA games for me to download and watch tomorrow. I mean, yeah. I feel like I pretty much got caught up on my college basketball NBA draft watching today. So I truly have a day tomorrow where I could sit down and spend a good 6-7 hours just doing this, Omari.
So because you are a real life football coach, I don't know if it's going to scratch the same itch for you, but I feel like I like football tactically more now since I've started covering basketball, in the last 5-6 years, just because it scratches a different part of my brain, I guess, if that makes sense. And I feel like college football is the same way, where tactically, I just feel like college football is much more interesting than the NFL, where I just think more stuff is viable, especially the run game. So because you are a real life football coach, I don't know if it's going to scratch that same itch. Part of the reason why I like it is because I could just think about something entirely different, completely different schemes, completely different tactics, everything. And I feel like that's the make or break for you. If you have that itch that needs to be scratched, then it'll probably be good. If you're I'm a real life coach, I don't need this, then maybe it won't take for you the same way it has for me.
I don't to hopefully our head coach, sometimes his wife will watch this. I hope she's watching right now. Probably not, because they have sick kids, but he doesn't let me call the plays. I don't get to be OC. So this would be a chance for me to scratch that itch that you're talking about. We're a triple option team. obviously on college football, there are multiple teams with the option to do that, pun intended. And so I could just like, hey, I'm OC in this, I'm reading the option, all of that. So I have no doubt that I could spend the 6-8 hours doing it. I'm just terrified that if I'm like, I kind of need 10 hours to completely scratch this itch, or like, what if I just get completely addicted and I'm like, you know what? I'm going to call in sick to school on Thursday. I'm going to skip professional development on Friday, forget that I have kids and husband duties. I'm just a little bit nervous that I can walk away from it once I get started.
Yeah. Like, I'm afraid for you because that's where like I've been like the guy, like, it's 5 a.m. No, I'm not playing that late tonight at all. It's a fun game. So we'll have to revisit this topic next week and see how much time you've lost to it. Because again, like I think as far as just actual play calling, it's pretty far.
Yeah. Wes says every time he goes beyond freshman difficulty level on that game, I throw a million picks. So Wes not getting addicted to college football or Madden. Steven says the worst if you're playing PS4 football at 2 a.m. Listen, Steven, I haven't seen 2 a.m. in a long time. So this is an all mailbag episode. If you're watching with us live, obviously you can drop some stuff in the comments as we go through it. But we have a whole bunch of submissions between Blue Sky, Twitter, and the Substack. So we're going to get right into it. We're going to start off with some questions about this season. Then there was a bunch of questions about the offseason 02. And then there was some questions directed at you about, it's still basketball related, but just some interesting ones that I'm curious to hear your answer on. So we'll start with this. We're going to start with this year. And this goes right into what Cloudy says. What was everyone's preseason win prediction? Mine was 30 LMAO. Listen, mine was less than 30, Cloudy. So I'm worse than you, my friend. Sai says first live, let's go. This is from Matt Chapman on Blue Sky. How many regular season wins do the Pistons finish up with, and what playoff seeding will they have? What do you think, Omari?
I think they crack 40.
Okay.
Wow. They've probably already surpassed my prediction for them at the beginning of the season.
Wes, real quick, Wes, we have to get back to those at some point. We got to go find that document and get back to them. But go ahead, Omari.
Yeah, I'm sure most people predicted somewhere within the range of 27 and 35. Like I think low end, high end, you probably expect maybe even lower, like Michael Dompier says 25 to 35. Like, but you probably expect like, a 10 win improvement on the low end just because 14 was so low. It's like they have to at least win 24. But you probably don't expect them to triple. And that's what they're on pace to do, So I say 40, and it's like that's crazy because they're already at 29 with 27 games left. So honestly, whatever we predicted is going to be so hilariously wrong that maybe we could just do a segment of it and then just throw it away, because I don't know if we need like everybody's predictions from 3 months ago are probably just hilariously off right now.
So Steven says Pistons best season over season improvement is plus 18 games achieved 3 times, 49 to 50 as the Fort Worth 95 Fort Wayne, 95, 96 and 2001-2. This should be able to blow past it. All right. So to this question, they're 29 and 26. So they have 27 games left. Is that what you said, Omari?
Yeah.
I'm going to guess, let's say they win. God, they are going to win 40, aren't they? Oh my God. It
would just take a lot. They have so much momentum and also so much in their favor standings wise right now that it would just take a lot.
They could go 10 and 17 and still be at 39. Like, what are we doing? This is crazy. I appreciate everybody carrying their own receipts. Omari Sankofa, the original, had them at 32. Like, everybody's calling them out, so themselves out, which I appreciate, because we're all going to be way 28. Wrong.
Like, I definitely didn't have more than 29. Like, I was scarred after last season. I'm like I'm never making a prediction again. Like, I didn't even want to make a prediction. I was like,
as Steven says, if they're 14 and 13, that's one game over 500. Yeah. That's 43 and 39 to end the season. I'm just going to say 40. I'm going to say 40. And I think at 40 and 42, I think that still ends up the 7 seed. So that's where I'm going to be at. I'm going to say 40 and 42. The Magic figure their stuff out, and they still end up as the 7, which gives them 2 home play-in games, which, can you imagine LCA for that? I mean, it could be 1, right, if they win their first one, but they would play both of them at home if it took 2, and 2 chances to get into the actual playoffs still. So That's what I'll call right now, 40-42, and they end up as the 7.
All right, so I'm gonna say that they go. I think that they go 15-12 over the last 27,
Okay,
which
let's
is
go.
actually a decline from the pace that they've played. That over the last 27, they're 18-9, so that's actually a decline. Uh, the schedule the rest of the way, like there was so much shakeup at the trade deadline that I'm just curious to see
That's
how
that's
things settle after. Right, like
That's true,
Golden
because
State
right
looked like they're
now
going to be,
it's going
you
off
know,
what teams' records are, but teams have changed. Just for that, Omari, they have the 18th ranked strength of schedule just based off opponent win percentage in the NBA.
and you
This
factor that in, and it's like, well, Golden State probably was, a winnable game, and now they have Jimmy Butler. So how winnable is that, right? Or, or they play the. I don't even know who else they play the rest. Like I need to look at their schedule. I've been out.
So I can tell you they have 2 against the Thunder, 1 against the
Yeah,
Cavs, Celtics, Knicks, Grizzlies, Nuggets, but 2 against the Wizards, 2 against the Pelicans, and 1 against each of the Jazz, Raptors, Nets, and Blazers. I mean, the Blazers were playing better. I know the Raptors went on a stretch as well. So, but again, like who knows what some of those teams will be trying to do in those scenarios, in those situations. I've seen some like health. Sai says here, assuming health outside of JI, this is an unfair caveat. I think I brought up on the last episode that all of these other guys have played 50 games. Now, Asar got a late start as well, but Cade and Beasley and Tobias, like they have had decent health outside of the 2 guys that missed major time. But, what if Cade rolled an ankle and missed 2 weeks? Like, I think we both would assume that they're not going over 500 in that 2
knock
weeks.
on wood real quick.
Knock on, like, I don't believe I can speak things into existence because I'm so wrong when I say stuff. There's no way I can actually predict or speak things. My guy, Mark Murray, 15-12. So maybe I'm going to be too low again on all of this.
Yeah, because I definitely see 15-12 as realistic, but like I'm thinking about games they have upcoming, and the Spurs, for example, like now you have De'Aaron Fox, so that's a
Sure.
really tough game all of a sudden. So, but 15-12 puts you at 44 wins, which is a 30-game improvement, which doesn't even really add up in your head. Like they improved, like they won more, like that's more than 3 times as many games. Like that's hard to like fathom, right? So.
Yeah.
So I don't know. I don't know. Like I think 15-12 is doable, but I would have to go through and like look at each individual roster and like figure out like how many of these teams are actually going to be trying to lose games down the stretch, right? Like you may only have 6, 7 teams that are like actively tanking, and then how many times do you play those teams in the last 10 games or so?
Here's what I'll say. I think the first 5 games, I told Harry this the other day because he was clowning me for still thinking they may not be a top 6 seed. Here are the first 5 games starting Friday. At the Spurs, back-to-back at Hawks, home versus the Clippers. Then 1 day off at home versus the Celtics, 1 day off home versus the Nuggets.
That's tough. Like right off the bat, that's tough.
That's 5 games in 8 days. All of those teams are good. There's a back-to-back in there. There's a little bit of travel at the start of it. Cade's coming off like this all-star festivities and all of that. So
they have 3 and 4 right off the bat.
3 and 4 right off the bat, with those teams being at Spurs, at Hawks, home versus the Clippers. I mean, if they go 4-1 or something in that stretch, like forget about it. Like this team's going to blow past what either of us just said. If they go 1-4 in that stretch, I don't think it's the end of the world because the schedule does get a little bit easier, but then they may hover around 500 the rest of the way or something. So
yeah, it'll be telling this next week. I think it's tough to, like again, like I checked the records and the Nuggets like have been better than the Pistons in that 18-9 stretch the Pistons have been in.
Nuggets have been good recently.
Like they've been really good. So yeah, there's some tough games. I wouldn't really pay too much attention to the strength of schedule right now because I don't think that's going to be too accurate.
Harry says, to be fair, Cade got a lot of rest in the All-Star game. I will say, to be fair, I didn't watch any of the All-Star games, so I have no idea what Cade did or did not do because that can be another episode in the offseason. We can talk about I didn't watch any of it. So we got to keep going, though. Alex Golden, our guy over with Setting the Pace, Pacers podcast from Twitter, said, Currently sitting as the 6th seed in the East, what realistic goals do you have for Detroit in the final stretch of the season? Is there a preferred playoff matchup you'd like to see Detroit in? If so, who and why? I think I would rather talk more about the second part of that question, Omari. We kind of addressed the first part, kind of expectations. We could go into individual player expectations, but that would take an entire episode. You're right now, you're probably, I think, realistically, and I don't know, they're blowing realistic-ism out of, that's not a word. Wes, help me out. Out of the air. You have the Cavs, Celtics, Knicks, Pacers, 1, 2, 3, 4. Is there a team there that you think makes sense? Is there a team you think they'd have a better chance to really take deep in a series? In any matchup that kind of makes sense. All really good teams above the Pistons there in the East.
My pops chimes in the all-star shame. Man, that's a good headline. Like if you were writing like an attack headline, like that would be perfect. The all-star shame. I got completely distracted by that.
Who's the best matchup for the Pistons?
Yeah, the best matchup. It's tough because all those teams have like stretch bigs, and I feel like they kind of got. They didn't get
except
lucky
for the Cavs.
Except for the Cavs, and well, Mobley's shooting it this year.
A little bit, yeah, yep.
Cat, like I feel like last game he didn't assert himself the way he normally does, and and obviously they went to MSG and they won the last two. I don't think Cat played in that first one they had though, where Cade had that triple double. But I don't know. It's just because they've had success against the Knicks, you want to say like that's the matchup that has the best chance for a 7-game series. But again, like you could just imagine Cat knocking down 11 threes in the first 2 games and just kind of tipping the scales early, right? So I'm not sure. Like they've had the most success against New York, so I think that's the safe guess. Miles Turner and Brook Lopez have knocked down so many threes. Like I think both of those guys would just demolish them based on current trends.
Wes says Pacers purely for my entertainment level. Like yeah, I think that would be real interesting. Here's what I'll say. Give me the Celtics. And you know why? If this is about figuring things out, is there a better team to expose all of your weakness in a playoff series than the Boston Celtics? Like, I think you would feel like coming out of that, you would have a lot of data on what each player on the roster can do, where the flaws are, where you have to get better on both ends of the floor, because they have the stretch big that can expose that. They hunt mismatches. You'll find out who they think are your weakest defenders. And then defensively, they can do a lot of creative things as well. And I think when the playoffs come around, they will get locked in with that. Yeah, Steven says, I want Cleveland just to do the JB grudge match. Like, yeah, that you got the JB thing with Cleveland there. So a lot of really interesting ones. Speaking of JB, this is our final kind of this season question from V Prasad on Blue Sky. Has JB been slowly expanding the playbook recently because they have their base offense down? More beef stew shooting threes, more playmaking from Duran and Asar, or has this just been a natural counters to the way teams guard Cade? What have you thought, just maybe the progression of the Pistons offense? We saw in that final game before the All-Star break, Asar essentially running primary initiator duties for the first 6 minutes of the game.
Yeah, we've definitely seen some evolution, and I think some of that, like regardless of injuries, is just going to be natural when you have a first-time coaching staff really getting adjusted, and players are getting adjusted to the scheme and everything. Like there's always going to be, I think, a period of time as you break in new schemes and concepts. Like obviously Asar, couldn't play the first 24 games or however many it was, so. There's a period where he has to get adjusted before you could even, really put the ball in his hands and, trust that he has the. I mean, he missed so much time, right? So I think there's always going to be a time piece in that. With that said, I think when a team is playing really well and the team has confidence and guys are really thriving in their role, that gives you a bit more leeway to try new things, right? Like Asar is doing so well in his off-ball stuff, and you have a D that can be filled, that it doesn't hurt really to put the ball in his hands for the first 3 minutes, and if it's working, to keep it going. Or Isaiah Stewart, as he's really gained confidence, like he's having his best season as a finisher, like his best season all around, really. Like I think he's had his best year. You could find those opportunities to pick and pop for threes a bit more, and find it within the flow of the offense, especially knowing now that teams really aren't defending him anymore. They're not really respecting that shot again. So I think it's just a comfort level thing. I think the longer you're within a scheme, there's naturally going to be growth within that. And I think with Ivy's injury, maybe that puts you in more of a position to experiment with Asar in that way. But otherwise, like we're like 2/3 of the way through the season, so you would expect to see improvement as far as that.
Well, my takeaway from the Bulls one was like JB just trusts his team to
Yeah.
be good, and they are talented enough and good enough and can figure it out that, hey, let's let Asar run our actions to start the game. And like, as you mentioned, if it doesn't go well for the first few minutes and you get down by 4 or 6 points, you trust your team that that's not going to be like just, oh my gosh, we can't come back from this. We can't adjust. We can't lock in. And if it does work well, you keep doing it. And I think that's where this team is at, which is crazy, right? Like it all goes back to what we watched last year. And it was like, you can't waste 3 minutes to start a game. This game is over if they start off slow. And
like last season, right? Like you're down 15-2 with like 12 minutes on the clock, right? Like the game would be over before it began sometimes.
You couldn't experience, you're just trying to find some form of success at all. And so like I don't know, maybe Monty to a fault just kept running out the same things. But I think now it's like they found success. They feel like this have this chemistry. They can always lock back into that. Now let's try to find the ceiling of this. Let's start to slowly expand things like, okay, Stu, step out, shoot a 3. Okay, Asar, you run the first 5 actions of the game. JD, we're going to put you in some of these situations. I think defensively, they've done those things as well. They've tried different. There was one I wanted to shout out from a few games a few weeks ago now against the Suns, where anytime they got a certain switch with Kevin Durant, the Suns did, Detroit automatically went zone. They got out of man-to-man and went into zone because they didn't like that matchup. Like, there's just those things that it looks like they have the foundational things figured out. So now you can start to expand on it. So we're going to go short break here. When we come back, we got a ton of questions about the offseason and the salary cap situation and contracts and all of that. So we need to get right into that right after this.
All right. We are back with segment 2. And we have a question here from Link Barice from Twitter/X, whatever you want to call it. How much cap space will the Pistons have next year? And is adding a starting power forward possible? So we can deal with the first part of that first, because Bryce, I know you put on your capologist hat recently and put some numbers together for us. So
yeah, so I got tired. Listen, Spelltrack is awesome. Keith Smith is amazing. Like, Keith Smith responds to me anytime I hit him up. But I just wanted to be able to like navigate numbers without, like, I just wanted a spreadsheet of my own. So I have that. I put it together yesterday so I could just look at these things. So right now, so everybody understands, like with everybody under contract, with the cap holds on guys, all of that. And this is important, Omari, assuming that Cade makes all NBA and that the Pistons convey their pick to Minnesota, they would be negative $33 million in cap space. Okay. To start, that's with the cap holds of Tim Hardaway Jr., Schroeder, Beasley, Lindy Waters, Paul Reed, Dennis Jenkins. What they can get to, Omari, so I will take all of those cap holds out, right? If they take all of those cap holds out, they can get to 19,376,000. So right around $20 million. So it's important for us to talk about that, because if you renounce all of those guys, you have to sign them with cap space. So if you want to bring any of them back, it has to be cap space or the room exception, which is like $8.5 million. Now you could get to a little bit more if you traded Fontecchio, right? And you traded him to, but here's what you have to remember. Brooklyn's the only team with cap space. So about the only team you could trade Fontecchio to, or if you really wanted to create cap space and trade Tobias Harris, is to the Brooklyn Nets, because they're the only team that's not sending money back to you. So just wanted to lay that out before we got into some of these other questions.
Yeah. So, essentially they're dealing with some room, but probably not enough to get a starting caliber power forward, especially with the way salaries are going back up. And I guess like starting caliber, there's still like a range within that, right? Like, are we talking like Bobby Portis tier, or like, what like exact tier of starting are we looking at? But with 19 million, you're just hoping to get like a rotation guy, like whether they start or come off the bench. It's just somebody who can give you a solid 25 minutes a night at least.
And just to be clear, if they went out and say they signed whoever, right? Like, let's just say Julius Randle. I am not like backing this, but let's say it's Julius Randle. If you use up all that cap space, then there's no money left for Malik Beasley unless you think Malik Beasley is going to sign for the room exception, which is, like I said, 8.7 million ish around there. Maybe you think that's going to be Malik Beasley's market. I think it's going to be better, but maybe you live in that world. Like, that's the Miles Turner thing, Omari. Let's say maybe they can get a Miles Turner for 25 million. Well, you could trade Fontecchio to Brooklyn, take no money back. You could have 25 million in cap space, but as Michael says here, you've renounced and have to fill roster spots, and you have no cap space to do it. So it's the room exception, it's the second round draft pick, and it's vet minimum type deals to fill out the roster. Let me just throw names at you. These are potential forwards via Spot Track. Julius Randle, does that interest you, Omari, as a upgrade starter over Harris?
I'm okay.
I'm okay as well. John Collins.
He's actually been decent for Utah.
He's had a really, really good year. And to be clear, Julius Randle's is on a player option and John Collins is on a player option as well. So these aren't even unrestricted free agents.
Yeah, I would actually go John Collins, I think, in that scenario, like especially with the age and athleticism aspects of it as well.
I think he would be an upgrade as a just production on the court. Like, I think in that scenario, you have to like move Harris's money somehow.
Yeah, you do.
I mean, then it gets like Portis has a player option, but like Portis does. Collins is a maybe. Like, that's what I would say as well. Collins, to Steven's point, probably too expensive, but he'd be interesting. Portis, Chris Boucher, and then you literally get into Trey Lyles, Precious Achua, like Jake LaRavia, who will be an unrestricted free agent, by the way. Like, you can easily outpay him, but like, I don't know that these guys are like starters that are really, really upgrading the position. Do you? Like, I just don't know that those names are out there even as free agents.
Yeah, I think those guys are great rotation pieces. I think they make you a better team. Like, is that the best use of your resources? Probably not. You could probably address your need for like shooting or whatever you want to accomplish there. It just on like a more rotational basis, right? Looking at one of those exceptions rather than one of the smaller exceptions, at least, rather than tapping into cap space. I would think based on the options that are out there.
And as Wes says, he said he'd rather start a SAR at the 4 than any of those guys, given the price. I agree. Yeah. And listen, Ray, like, I like Trey Lyles as well. I got clowned for liking Trey Lyles when he was in Detroit. I just don't think he's an upgrade as a starting 4. I don't think the 4-man is getting upgraded over Tobias Harris this offseason unless it's a SAR as the 4, and then you build out things from there. And again, just to reiterate, if you want, well, we'll get to some of this other. So let's go on. Josh McCain from Blue Sky. No matter how the Pistons finish the season, what are the team's biggest needs going into the offseason? And I saw a question from Will J. I'm sorry, Will J. My bad. And he says, besides Cade, who is priority number 1 for the Pistons to take that next step next season? I think these questions kind of go hand in hand a little bit, Omari. What is the priority this offseason? Like, I kind of outlined the money situation. They could just keep those guys cap holds, work as an over-the-cap team. You have the non-tax MLE to bring Beasley back. Then you sign Schroeder and THJ and Paul Reed, and maybe is there an upgrade on the roster though? Because in that scenario, you're essentially running it back and then hoping, as Will J says here, for improvement from individual players.
Yeah, I mean, I look at running it back. What did Orlando do this offseason? Like, they went and got KCP, and they said, we have our young guys, and we're going to bet on them continuing to take steps forward. And France has done that this season. If I'm the Pistons, I'm looking at next season. Like, we bring back Malik Beasley. We see if we can retain some of the other vets for the right price, obviously. You have a second round pick, so maybe you have some sort of draft asset there. You probably convey your first at this point, unless you have some lottery luck. But otherwise, you probably keep this going. You're still looking at operating at an asset, not deficit, especially if you get that pick back. But like you look around the
you're
league,
neutral, right? Like you're
yeah,
neutral.
but you're neutral. You're still not on a level of some of these other teams who are contending. They're ahead of you, and they have asset pools to draw from to go for some of these stars. So I don't know if you change the plan that significantly this offseason. I think okay, you exceeded expectations. Guys like Ron, Asar, Duran, like ideally these guys continue to get better. So and we're gonna have to pay these guys at some point too,
Yeah.
right? Like Duran and Ivy are going to be extension eligible this summer. You're looking at a Sar and Sasser next summer, and then Ron the year after that. So every single year, Trajan's going to have at least one young guy whose future he's going to have to evaluate. So, especially with the draft pick situation still being what it is, like I'm looking at adding rotational pieces, and I'm trusting that the young guys are going to continue to get better. And the extent that they do, I think determines who gets the extensions and who doesn't. And then you just kind of operate from there. Eventually you have a window to add a piece like Indiana did with Siakam. But you also look at a team like the Grizzlies where they've never really made that big swing. They've just kept adding young guys and they've continued to win games. They have 2 All-Stars and, John, Jaren Jackson, and that could be an outcome for the Pistons as well. So long story short, like I don't think you shake things up. I don't think you need to go get a starting power forward. I think you look at what you have in this roster and then you continue to fill in gaps, veteran point guard, stuff like that.
Yeah, and to that point, Steven says we have to see how Schroeder turns out on this team. That is an unknown. And that's where, like, going the under the cap route, you could go under the cap. You could spend money on Malik Beasley and then just assume that you can upgrade. Let's say you paid Beasley $12 million a year, right, Omari?
Mhm.
Then you would have roughly 7-8 million in cap space and the room exception. Maybe you think you can upgrade what you got from Schroeder and what you got from Tim Hardaway Jr. for $8 million, right? Like you could upgrade each of those guys, find someone for $8 million to be your backup point guard, find somebody else for $8 million to space the floor better or equally as good with maybe some more defense or something as Tim Hardaway Jr. So to me, that's really what the biggest thing is going to be. I think we'll all agree, and we'll talk about Malik Beasley because we had questions about him, that Malik Beasley needs to be on this team next year. And if he's not, that's the biggest priority, is replacing that. But I think what the ultimate decisions come down to, outside of the ones we're about to talk about with JI and JD, is do you just run it back with this exact roster, or do you think you can make some small changes and upgrade a Schroeder or a Tim Hardaway Jr. or trade Fontecchio? And, maybe Clintman is ready. I know people like always are talking about him and asking about him, but I'm with you. I think it's just, we saw like this proof of concept of floor spacers with some gravity and whatever has allowed these young guys to at least try to figure it out. I'm signing up for another half of a season of that. And then, unless something goes completely wrong or different or something down the stretch, and then maybe you make a big move at the deadline, I'm starting to push back even like, hey, make a big move this off season. I don't know that I'm even there, but we still have a couple months of this season.
Yeah, it has to be the right big move, right? Like if you
Sure.
could do something like what Indiana did, where you could get a Siakam type talent without breaking the bank, then that makes sense. But that type of deal has to be there, and it's tough to see that type of deal being available for the Pistons over a team, that has like
let's hold up.
capital,
I don't
right?
mean to cut you off.
Yeah.
We have questions about it, so let's
Yeah.
hold off. Okay. This is from Sassy on Blue Sky. Thoughts on what should happen to Duran in the offseason? Despite defensive limitations, there's clear lob chemistry with K displayed several times every game. Yet he could fetch a nice trade from the Lakers, as he's exactly what they're looking for to team up with Luka. So Jalen Duran offseason contract, move on from, I guess, is an option here. What are your thoughts? Aruna also asked, is it more likely that JD or JI gets moved? We'll talk about JI as well. What are your thoughts with JD?
I don't think either of them necessarily needs to be moved, but including JD. I don't think you have to necessarily extend both of them this offseason either. It could be a scenario where you extend one and then the other goes into restricted free agency. I think the thing with Duran is for him to be the franchise center, and we've talked about it, like he's got to be the rim protector. He's got to be the guy every night setting that tone. And I feel like we've seen improvement, especially over the last 4 or 5 weeks as far as his impact on that end. Obviously, his lob chemistry with Cade has been phenomenal. And I think he's been better as a playmaker as of late, too, just making really quick, fluid reads and half court scenarios. I think some of the fast break reads could use work here and there, but I think at half court he's shown that he can make some of those flashes. So, he's got a lot going for him, as far as being the franchise center. But if you go into the offseason and you're not sure he's there yet, either you gamble and maybe you offer a extension that isn't as big, and he can bet on himself and hit the market in a few years, or maybe it doesn't make sense, so you just wait till the summer. But I don't next summer, that is. But I don't think you go into this offseason like either we have to extend Duran and Ji, and or we have to trade them, right? Like you could very well let these decisions go on for a little while if you're not quite there yet. But yeah, for Duran, that's the bottom line. It comes down to what he can do defensively and what he can do from a consistency standpoint as well.
So Sam K from the Substack did kind of ask about that. Like, what have we seen thus far? What do you think the extension should look like? What do you think those guys are looking for, etc.? I'll just lay out the cap situation here, Omari. So everybody remember, Tobias is coming off the books that year. Fontecchio is coming off the books that year. Asar, Ron are still on their rookie deals. Sasser would actually have a club option. Klintman's non-guaranteed. So I just put $14 million in for Malik Beasley. Right? So let's say 14 million for Beasley. Let's say some combination of $50 million in 26-27 is an extension number for Ivy and Duran. The Pistons would still be under the cap in that situation, depending on if other guys, if Hardaway Jr. got a multi-year deal or shoot. My point is giving those guys deals in the 20-ish 25, 30, like whatever, it doesn't put the Pistons in a really, really tough situation because the Harris deal is coming off at that point. And again, Fontecchio's deal is coming off at that point. You also won't have a new rookie yet in that situation. So I just, those numbers are going to sound big. We've talked about it a little bit with JD's, I was a little bit more like, hey, I would probably just wait, let it hit restricted free agency, and then figure it out from there. We'll see what it looks like down the stretch here. It really stinks because, with JI, it was inconsistent, but we saw some really good stretches. But I don't think they're going to put themselves in an impossible situation if they do extend those guys' belt. Now, like not max numbers, right? Like neither of those guys are anywhere close to that for me. But like I said, a combination, whatever it is for each of them, around 50 million in 26-27 in that offseason, adding Beasley on the roster still, and they would still be under the cap. So yeah. And real quick here from S Mahoney, can you keep THJ and Beasley? Absolutely. Like Beasley comes down to if he wants to be here or not, but they absolutely can. They could do it a couple different ways. I think the easiest way is you just operate over the cap. You sign Beasley with the non-tax MLE, and then you sign THJ with his bird rights. And they have early bird rights on Schroeder as well, which should be plenty to sign him. So they absolutely can they can keep all of these guys, no question, assuming Beasley wants to come back on the non-tax MLE.
And I would also add, you look at what Houston did with Jalen Green and Şengün, where they offered deals that I think were pretty team friendly for both sides. I think with Jalen Green, maybe they banked with his upside a little bit more with what he ended up signing for. But there's nothing stopping you from trading guys down the road. Like especially like if you could get a guy on a good deal, and it's a guy who fits your team, you believe in him, you sign him, and then you figure stuff out later. I don't think
Isaiah Stewart, Omari.
Stewart, yeah.
Why does Isaiah Stewart always come up in trade talks? Not just because he's a good player, but because people look at $15 million flat deal and they're like, oh yeah, we can add that. So
yeah, like you need contracts. You need guys on the upside.
Great
like
point.
You need that stuff. So, again, like a lot of it comes down to what Ivy and Durant want. But from the Pistons, then you're playing great basketball. These guys are part of your future. I don't think you go into this offseason like, it's either we sign them now or we have to trade them immediately. There's a number you could probably sign and, and you need players, like you need contracts. I don't think you have to like, unless it's like, oh, you're paying me the max or I'm leaving or whatever, like something you can't negotiate with. Like there's a number that probably makes both sides happy, and then you kick some of these potential cap issues down the road.
Yeah, I mean, my thing is, this is why I'm not as sour on the Tobias Harris contract as I once was, because now all of a sudden that's $26 million expiring deal. This was why I was high on making a move for CJ McCollum if it didn't take crazy assets, because again, that's an expiring between him and Harris. I was like, that's a lot of expiring money if at next year's deadline they want to make a big move. Okay, let's go to break. When we come back, we'll have to go through these a little bit quicker, but we are going to start off with what we were talking about, where, okay, where do these assets sit with the Pistons and what could they do to make a big move when the time comes? We'll get into that right after this.
All right, we are back.
Let's go with the Derek Brooks comment, Omari, if you
Yeah.
hold up from the Substack.
Yep, we're going to go with this comment from Derek Brooks. If when the Pistons make the playoffs and have their full array of draft picks back at their disposal, should they consider getting into the impending Trae Young sweepstakes? With the success this season has been, it feels like they are playing with house money and have afforded themselves more time. But is Trae Young even a fit? I'm at the least intrigued, I think. Well, here's the thing. Like, it's not going to take just draft picks to get Trae Young. Like if I'm Atlanta, I'm not even looking at the Pistons unless they're giving me Jaden Ivey. Personally, like I think that's like the starting point for that type of deal. So, I think that's the real conversation. If you're the Pistons, well, I mean, it's not just does Trae Young fit, but when you have teams that can offer like 11 first-round picks, like what on your roster is going to tip the scales in your direction? And I think when you answer those types of questions, you have to really be committed to the player you're trading for. And I don't know if Trae Young is the guy that you look for to solve issues for the Pistons.
Listen, I'm probably a little more positive on Trae Young than most, but I just don't think this makes sense for the Pistons, not with what we've seen.
And I like Trae too, but not on this thing.
Yeah, I think we know what we have in Cade. I'm not saying you don't need more ball handling or anything like that. I just don't know, I don't know how Trae plays off of that. I feel like they tried it a little bit with DeJounte, and look, they traded him. I mean, you can see what they're doing with Trae now is they're just accumulating wings to play off of him. And unless you think that's what Cade's role is, I don't think they make sense together. But this leads into another question from the Substack from Cy Ramesh. If the Pistons will make their best all-in offer, who can they realistically attain? I kind of wanted just to use this, Omari, because these names are always coming up, right? But to look at what the Pistons all-in offer, like where do they sit at asset-wise? And so what I want to point out is once they convey this pick in 2025, they can't trade their 2026 pick because you can't trade back. That is literally the stepping rule. But they would have access to all of their picks moving forward. So they could do the Godfather offer of, eventually 4, but definitely 3 and swaps.
Yeah,
you have
like
multiple
27, 29, 31 plus whatever, something like that.
Exactly. Or you could do, or you have expiring contracts. We just talked about with Tobias and Fontecchio. If you give these contracts to Ivy and JD and young talent, they can't beat out the Thunder. They can't beat out the Rockets. They can't beat out the Jazz. I think even the Spurs, but it's better than what it was 12 months ago because the young talent looks solid and they're going to have access to draft picks, along with they could just throw like 8, second round picks in or something like that if they wanted to. So, they're in better position than what it looked like at one point to go get Cade, that second guy, if that second guy isn't already on the roster.
Yeah. And I think we both agree it's just not Trae Young. Like he is an entirely on ball dominant guard, and me and him are the same height, which I say to say that he's not helping you defensively at all.
No.
And that's just a lot of salary for two guys who give you a lot of the same stuff. Like, I don't know if that works. I think it works better than Trae and DeJounte Murray, but that's still, I think, a pretty wide gap from being a championship contender for what you're paying for those two.
So Ashton's here, said, Derek said, Ashton, we love you, man. Ashton shouting back, love y'all too, bro. Thanks for embracing Cade. Listen, I mean, Ashton, it's easy to embrace Cade. I feel like we've been a very Cade friendly and pro podcast throughout the years. And my thing is like, I said this I don't want to take the ball out of Cade's hands. And I finally feel justified this year because we've seen what it looks like whenever the spacing is around him and all of that. I think we've seen the proof of concept. I realize I throw out that phrase a lot, but we've seen it. Put floor spacers around him. Like, I love Malik Beasley. I think he's awesome. He's great for the vibes, all of that. But you have to have that, whether it's Malik or somebody else, continue to build out the other aspects of it. The Detroit sports fan, do you guys think that THJ will be back next year on a smaller deal? Perfect guy to bring off the bench. We've talked about that quite a bit. From Blue Sky, do the Pistons prioritize bringing back Malik over THJ in the offseason? Seems like probably not both. Like, to be clear, you can bring back both. I would definitely prioritize Malik over THJ. Omari, are you on the same page there?
Yeah, I mean Malik is like he's like second in the NBA in made threes, and he's shooting like 41%. Like there are only a handful of guys, like especially at Malik's price point. Like I don't think there's literally anybody else you would want than that.
That's there. I assume there's money spots where you would just say, you know what, like this is pricing us out of Malik Beasley.
Mhm.
Maybe we're better off getting whatever percent THJ is as a floor spacer for 40% of the cost, right? Like, I think Malik's market's going to be stronger than THJ's is this summer. But like, I looked at the way guys got paid last offseason. I think we're going to be surprised that Malik doesn't go for as much as what you may think, Omari. Like, when you just look at what some guys got last year, and I could see teams talking themselves into like, oh, he's having a career year. We're not going to pay a premium when he probably comes down a little bit or something. So
yeah, and the thing is, like, what team will be able to offer Malik the role he has here in Detroit?
Yeah,
with the same money that they'll be able to give. Like it's like you look around the league and it's just like we'll have to see how it goes down, but it's just tough to see there being a better fit. Like when you actually look at what other teams are looking at, like fight financially and also role wise.
Thomas, I have your question marked. We will try to get to it at the end. I promise I'm not ignoring you, my guy. Yeah, like you get a chance to play with Cade Cunningham. He's going to be all NBA. He's one of the best players in the league. Like it's stuff we can say now. We've talked about it for a while. Will players want to come play for the Pistons if Cade becomes what we think he can become? And now we're seeing it. And you see like what he creates for others. Detroit basketball from Twitter. I'm going to skip over your question about Malik and THJ because we've talked about it so much, but you gave us another one. We can transition a little bit here now. Given what we've seen this year, are you now comfortable with all of the Ivy, Asar, and Duran in the starting lineup to start next season, despite the spacing concerns? And not Keith B from Blue Sky also asked the same thing of, is the Asar and Duran being able to play together debate officially over? Where do you land on that, Omari, in terms of like, are you think Asar and Duran have figured it out and those type of things?
Yeah, that debate for me is not officially over. Just because we're not dealing with that big of a sample size, like I just think I would need to see more to say it's officially over. But I think we've seen significantly more evidence that it can work. So it's an ongoing conversation. But this is by far the best stretch that those two guys have had together, and a lot of it is just because they're able to overwhelm teams with their rebounding, like with what they can do in transition. It's just a lot of havoc. And I think that like that's essentially Houston's entire strategy is just play defense and create havoc. And if you can't hit a shot, and it also helps, of course, that Ivy shot like 40% or however, like I can't remember what he shot from three, but it was good, obviously somewhere between 37 and 40. Like
he's over 40 right now. Like on the
season,
it was
like
he's
around
at 40%.
40, right?
Like the catch and shoot has been good.
Yeah, like in my mind, I'm like, he's over 40, right? And I'm like, that's so good.
No, he
like,
was. He is. Oh, I have the stats right here. Oh, like I'm with you.
So that helps. And
41% on 5 attempts. And to be like, I realize he got hurt, but that was 150 attempts for Jaden Ivey this year. That's not a nothing sample size. I mean, even for his career on 870 attempts, He's at 35%. That's
Yeah.
not quite where you would want it. But if
But
you
he
told me,
was never
Jay,
broken though, you know.
if he was 37% from his career, we would take that right now, right? I would. I would take that right now if you tell me he's like 36, 37% bouncing around right there.
Yeah. So, and it also helps that Asar has been doing more with the ball, and I think that alleviates some of his weaknesses as a shooter when he could just go get a paint touch and he's still not great at the line, but he could get to the line or just find an open shooter or whatever. I think him having the ball in his hands more, and if I could knock down open threes off of him, and then you have Duran as your there's a framework in there that could work, but I think having two of those guys in the Star and J.I. being able to handle the ball makes that a lot more workable. So if what we're seeing from Asar continues, and I don't see why it wouldn't, then yeah, I mean that helps a lot because now you have two ball handlers that could overwhelm the opposing team. Which again, that really helps undo some of the issues with spacing when you have two guys that could just get downhill.
Yeah, my thing is I still do have some concerns offensively. I don't think the shooting's ever going to be the fix. I think the path to it working is what we've seen in Cleveland. I've mentioned this a couple times, references a couple times. The Cleveland Bigs are making it work this year. Yes, because Mobley's spacing the floor a little bit, but because both of those guys pass the ball really well and they pass the ball to each other really well. I highlighted that on the Substack recently where Cade got doubled. They put two on him. He hits Duran in the short roll. Duran's able to face up. Asar cuts in from the corner. He makes the pass to him. Asar finishes. It really comes down to Asar being able to attack all of this space teams give him when they play off of him, because Cade can't continue to attack through that. So then the more Asar cuts and finishes, grabs offensive rebounds and finishes, catches and attacks space and finishes, the less likely teams are to just completely forget about him off the ball. So I think that's really where it comes down to. We are going to speed it up here just a little bit. I have to talk about this one because it's the draft. So Scott Moorhead from Twitter, is the scenario where they take a bunch of second rounders and trade back into the first round. Any thoughts on likely targets? So I'll ask you, Omari, would you be interested in that? Do you think that doing that, I don't think it would even take the 5 if the Thunder had to do last year, if you included the actual second round pick in 2025, that's going to be at least top 40, maybe top 35. So I don't think you're getting into the top 20, but I think you could get into the 20s with that one and a few others. What do you like? Did you like the idea of that, I guess?
Yeah, I mean, if there's a Cam Whitmore type guy who's sliding
Sure.
out of the top 20, and it's yeah, we could scratch some change together and make this happen, then by all means go for it. But I don't think you need to look at this draft like, oh, we have to go get a young guy. If there's nobody there that you think can make a difference. But on the other end of that, the Grizzlies seem to get somebody, off the scrap heap every single year, and they end up being a rotation guy. If you could get a GG Jackson, in the back half of the first or early, So yeah, if that type of guy is there, by all means do it. But I don't think you have to get a first round pick in this draft if it's not going to be a lottery type pick.
Wes says, interesting note, Asar unassisted field goals have gone up 10% as he's handled more ball handling, not scoring with the ball in his hands, actually even less now than he was before, which is interesting. He's initiating offense and then still playing off ball. Jack Nowowski on Blue Sky brought up Markovic from Mega. That's a big guy I brought up recently that spaces the floor. Ryan Cockbrenner, the big man at Creighton, doesn't space the floor but protects the rim. And Will Riley, a freshman at Illinois that's coming on strong here late in the season, asking about second round picks. So those are some names. I'll throw out a few other names here. Danny Wolf is a guy that would be in this range for me if we're talking back into the first, top of the second. Alex Caravan at Connecticut. JoJo Tugler at Houston is a big-time defensive, think Ryan Dunn. But obviously Ryan Dunn's making shots now. There's some other guys that have fallen into this range as well. I will be honest, guys. This is the range I'm a little less excited about right now, but things could still change. I think, Omari, I would just take that Raptors pick. I would just stay there in the second round. Like you said, unless the Cam Whitmore free fall because of whatever medical intel or something like that happens, I just think I would set there. I think that's the advantage of that Raptors pick, is it at least is high there in the 30s. Matthew Crow on Blue Sky. In looking at Jalen Duren's improvement from the line over the season and last season, do you hold out any hope for him developing into someone who can space the floor?
I don't think you hold out hope. Like that's something that he works on all the time. Like I think all bigs in the NBA at this point, like if they never take threes in games, like in practice, like you or after practice, you see guys getting threes up. So like there's never been a time where I've not seen Duren like taking threes behind the scenes. But I think with that, he is so good as a roller, and his just general archetype is that of a guy who's going to be most impactful around the rim. Uh, like I think that's something that comes down the road if it comes, right? I think that's probably not high on the priority list for his development before he masters other aspects of the game. But obviously, seeing what he's done at the line, what he did last season, and his improvement this season does show that there's some shooting touch. So who knows? Maybe we start to see him work pick and pops into his game here and there at some point just to see how it goes and if he does have a Dak for it outside of free throw scenarios. But I don't think you make that a priority per se unless like he would just really start shooting it right to where it just becomes like a no brainer.
So Shawnee Pat in the hat and Sean, we have your super chat. We're saving that for the end of the episode and we'll close out with that. But says, what up, though, Pistons fans? Legit, but how can JB not be a top 2 finalist for coach of the year if this team holds 6 or even gets to 5? Listen, I've been preaching him as a top 3 at the very least. I think Kenny Atkinson absolutely deserves some credit and for what he's done. But I think, JB's got to be right there after that, right, Omari? Like, I don't know. At one point, I was pushing Jamal Mosley because they were winning despite all the injuries. That's not necessarily something I would push now. Like, Dagnall obviously has done a nice job. Taylor Jenkins, Ime. But yeah, I think JB is right there in the conversation for 2. I would assume Kenny probably wins it if they win the East by 5+ games. But I think he has a real argument.
Yeah, I mean, I would think so as well. Like, how many other coaches have been more impactful, than for JB to take over a team that just won 14 games and now they're on pace to triple that. I think, yeah, like Mark Daigneault obviously, has coached a really good Thunder team, so he's got a great case. Kenny Atkinson, for a lot of the same reasons, taking over a Cleveland team that, was really good, and now they're, potentially the best team in the league. So there are some other candidates, but I would have to think JB, like at the very least, he has a top, like to be a top 3 case this season for that award. No other coach has seen a big single season turnaround this season than he has with the Pistons.
So Thomas says, what's the ceiling on defense of this group? Listen, like before the season, I would have said we're at it. Like, I don't know what to say. I give a lot of credit to JB. I give a lot of credit to Cade. And I do think Duren's been better this year. I always want to shout out the players. It's not like you look up and down this roster, Omari, and say, oh, really solid defensive player, hangs his hat on defense. Obviously, Isaiah Stewart has been awesome. I mean, they're 10th in defensive rating right now with a bunch of young guys playing and some vets that aren't necessarily known for their defense. So Ron can get better there still. I think Asar still has a higher ceiling. Cade's probably always going to be neutral because of the offensive load. JD still has room for growth. Like, I guess a top 10 defense. I'm skeptical to say like top 5, but I didn't think we'd be anywhere close to this right now. So maybe I'm wrong.
Yeah, I mean, you would have to think like the ceiling is top 5, or or I guess the
It could
potential was there. Asar, I'm like already one of the game's best perimeter defenders. I think Ron's got some really great instincts on that side, like some really great tools. Cade, he's not going to give you 36 minutes of great defense every single night, but especially in big moments, he's capable of stepping up and making those really big plays. Like he can lock in and become a positive there. Duren, like he's had some nice moments. He's got room for growth. Isaiah Stewart's gotten a lot better this season. Maybe he still has room, right? Like who
He's
knows?
unreal, man.
Ji, like he has room for growth. So yeah, if they're already top 10 right now, and a lot of their best defenders are still, or most high upside defenders are still so young and still have a way to go, then I mean, I don't see why they couldn't be a top 5 team if they continue their current trajectory. It's just tough when you also have teams like Minnesota's going to be there as long as they have Gobert,
OKC.
OKC, Orlando obviously is going to be there. So, you know, maybe more so like 3 through 8, 3 through 7, but certainly top 10, if not top 5.
All right. A couple questions specifically for you before we close it out with that super chat. This was from All Star Motorcade on Twitter. Hey, Omari, random question for the mailbag. Whenever a new front office and or coaching staff comes in, do you have to establish relationships with new sources, or do you typically have enough relationships within the organizations for that not to matter?
So it all matters. Like I think reporting, like you're always source building. Like even if there are not changes that are like huge public front office sweeps, like there are still behind the scene changes that take place. Like Troy from year one to year two, changed some people in his front office. Like there are different assistants who have come in and out under different coaches. Like I think that process is just always ongoing. Like as a reporter, there are always people coming and leaving and all aspects of the org and like around the league in general. And you're just always getting to know people and continuing to develop relationships you already have. So obviously, when a new coach comes in, a new front office comes in, more often than not, those relationships are starting fresh. But yeah, you also have people who have been around, and those relationships continue, and relationships continue with people who leave too. Like they work for other teams, but uh, they're still in the league, right? Like you still talk to them, you still see them around. So long story short, like that's just a part of the job that's like always ongoing. Like even when things appear stable, like you're still relationship building, you're still talking, getting to know people. So, yeah, like a season like what happened this past offseason can prompt more of that, but it's not something that starts to stops. Like, it comes and goes in phases, but it never stops. It's always ongoing.
Stuart Mora from Blue Sky. Question for Omari Sankofa. Can you talk about the role Fred Vinson had on the team? Where has he focused his energy? What have you noticed about him? What makes him such a well respected coach?
Yeah. I like it's tough to say if there's like a secret or anything, right? I think the reality is that he's a guy that was a great shooter himself, and he's had a lot of success with getting players to figure out how to properly just get the energy transfer down. Like you see how thorough he is with guys like Ron and Asar, and like just how highly they spoken of his approach and just the patience and day to day aspect of it. I do really want to do a deeper, breakdown on what he's brought to this team more specifically. Because I think the nuances of coaching, like you could say so much, but a lot of that stuff, I think, um, like there's a lot we don't see too, right? Like I'm not up at 5 a.m., with some of these guys in the gym when they're getting reps down. So I do want to do a deeper dive on that at some point. But I think with him, it's just one of those things where the results kind of speak for themselves. Where you look at the work he's done with guys like Lonzo and Najee Marshall, and we still have to see how it pays off here in Detroit. I don't know if 3-4 months is enough to really make an impact, but the guys love him. He's always present. You see him at every practice. You see him in the locker room. Like, he's really been a key figure in the organization, and obviously somebody that they really wanted, given that they hired him before they even had a head coach. So they knew whoever was going to come in, that Fred was going to be part of it and lend his helping hand.
All right. Before we close this out, want to thank everybody for joining us. Thank you for the questions before, during. We appreciate the support so much. Please like, share, subscribe, continue to support the podcast. We appreciate you guys. Again, thank you everybody that was here live. We always enjoy the comments. Everybody keeps it clean and engaging and respectable. And we appreciate that so much. If you're listening after the fact, we appreciate you just as much as well. We did have this super chat here to close us out. So I will read this, and then Omari, I'll let you close it out from there. So Sean, thank you for the super chat. We appreciate you so much for that. Always, everybody who supports the podcast, especially with the super chat like this, thank you. But he says, have to ask for y'all to pour one out for Andy Isaac, one of the best ever on the Bird app. Prayers up for all who knew him. So Omari, I know you have some words there and can take us home.
Yeah, so for those who don't know, Andy Isaac, Word of Isaac on Twitter, it is one of the biggest sports fans in Detroit. He has a relationship with all the local professional sports teams, including the Pistons, and people know him for his sense of humor and his food takes. Isaacs Eats. He's put together lists of the best, pretty much anything you could get in the city. So Awesome dude. He's been battling cancer since 2006, and he tweeted earlier today that he recently entered hospice. So, obviously, sad news, but Andy, we love you, and again, one of the biggest, best guys meet out there. Obviously, somebody who's been legendary in the local Detroit sports scene. So, big Pistons fan, great guy, and if you haven't followed him, go and do that right now because again, he's one of the best guys out there.
Yeah, just however you do your thing, prayers up, whatever. But sending our support, obviously, from the Pistons Pulse. And a great comment here. Thanks for calling this out, Sean. And so, Chili says hit the thumbs up, people. And Matthew, we got from Taiwan. I think this is our first Taiwan. So thank you, Matthew, for joining from there. Appreciate all of you. Cancer sucks. Yes. So thanks to everybody. Omari, close it out, my guy.
Yes, big thanks as always to our audio producer, Robin Chan, our editor-in-chief, Dakota Avery Nichols, and a big shout out to Wes Davenport, and we'll talk to you all next week.